No, Ethan Whitmore said quietly, staring at the torn notebook in his hands. This child just found a defect my senior engineers missed for 8 months. The classroom went completely still. Somewhere near the back wall, a student dropped a pencil. Mrs. Helen Granger's smile hardened for half a second before disappearing. Maya Brooks stood beside her desk in silence, her thin fingers clenched tightly at her sides while rain tapped softly against the classroom windows. Then Ethan turned another page, and the color slowly drained from his face. 3 hours earlier, the hallway outside Jefferson Elementary smelled faintly of bleach, wet jackets, and burned cafeteria pizza. Maya noticed all of it while sitting alone on the floor near classroom 204 with her science notebook pressed against her chest. One corner of the notebook was damp from the rain outside. The spine had been repaired 3 different times with yellow tape that no longer stuck properly. A tiny metal screw rested in the pocket of her faded hoodie, rubbing against her fingers every time she moved. Inside the classroom, students laughed louder than usual. Today was sponsor day. Important people were visiting. Rich people. People who wore polished shoes even when it rained. Maya glanced down at the paper bracelet around her wrist from St. Agnes Community Clinic. Her mother had forgotten to take it off after leaving the emergency room 2 nights earlier. The bill was still folded inside Maya's backpack beside a peanut butter cracker packet she had been saving since yesterday. "You waiting for someone?" a janitor asked gently while pushing a mop bucket past her. Maya shook her head once. "No, sir." The man looked at the notebook. "You in the science showcase?" Maya nodded carefully. "Maybe." The answer made him pause, but before he could say anything else, the classroom door opened sharply. Mrs. Helen Granger stood there in a cream-colored blazer with a bright smile prepared for donors and cameras. The smile faded slightly when she saw Maya. "There you are," she said. "I've been looking for that notebook." Maya stood immediately. "I fixed the pages," she said softly. "You said I could still bring it if I fixed them." Mrs. Granger's eyes dropped to the torn edges sticking out unevenly from the cover. "Maya," she sighed, lowering her voice. "Today is important. We have executives visiting from Whitmore Energy. We cannot present this." She lightly pinched the notebook between 2 fingers. Maya tightened her grip. "Please don't bend page 17. Mrs. Granger gave a short laugh through her nose. "You are far too attached to scraps of paper." Inside the classroom, students were already setting up polished display boards with glossy printed titles and plastic models. Maya's project sat on no board at all. Just the notebook. Just pencil sketches. Just handwritten calculations squeezed into margins stained by oil and old fingerprints. Chloe Parker glanced over from her table near the windows. Her display was enormous, mounted on white foam board with blue LED lights glowing around the edges. "Mrs. Granger," Chloe called brightly. "Mr. Whitmore's convoy just pulled into the parking lot." The room instantly changed. Students straightened. Teachers fixed their posture. Someone sprayed floral air freshener near the door. Maya lowered her eyes and quietly stepped toward the back row, but Mrs. Granger stopped her. "Actually," she said, voice sharper now, "before our guests arrive, let's discuss presentation standards." Several students exchanged looks. Maya already knew that tone. Mrs. Granger slowly lifted the notebook higher for the room to see. "This," she announced, "is what happens when someone confuses clutter with intelligence." A few students laughed immediately. Maya felt heat crawl into her face, but she did not cry. She only watched one loose page slide halfway out from the damaged spine. Page 17. Her hand moved instinctively toward it. Then Chloe's presentation board shifted slightly under the fluorescent lights, and for the first time that morning, Maya saw the silver valve sketch printed near the center of it. Her breathing stopped, because buried inside Chloe Parker's beautiful display was the exact same mistake Maya had circled in red pencil 3 months ago. Maya's fingers closed around the loose page so fast it almost tore. The laughter in the classroom faded under the pounding sound of her own heartbeat, while Chloe Parker continued smiling beside the glowing display board near the windows. Blue LED lights reflected against the polished white foam, making the silver valve diagram shine brighter than it should have under cheap classroom fluorescence. Maya knew every line of that drawing. She knew the crooked angle near the lower pipe because she had erased and redrawn it 6 times at the laundromat while her mother folded other people's clothes beside industrial dryers that rattled all night long. Mrs. Granger noticed Maya staring. "Problem?" she asked lightly. Though her fingers tightened around the torn notebook, Maya swallowed once. "That valve is backwards," she said quietly. A few students rolled their eyes immediately. Chloe laughed under her breath. "It's literally from the approved schematic package," she replied. Mrs. Granger checked all of it. Maya looked at the board again. The polished version hid the mistake better than her pencil sketch had. But it was still there. The pressure release direction was wrong. If the valve overheated after midnight load cycles, the housing could crack. She had written it 3 months ago in red pencil beside a coffee stain. Mrs. Granger stepped forward before Maya could say anything else. "Mr. Whitmore will be here any second," she warned softly. "Do not embarrass yourself." But Maya barely heard her, because taped near the bottom edge of Chloe's display was something else. A small printed label with a project timestamp. February 11th. Maya's eyes narrowed slightly. Her notebook pages were dated January 3rd. Mrs. Granger suddenly shifted the board a few inches, covering part of the label with her hand. "Everyone ready?" she called brightly toward the class. "Remember posture. Remember eye contact." The room scrambled instantly. Chairs scraped. Posters straightened. Somebody dropped a calculator onto the tile floor. Outside the classroom windows, rainwater slid down in crooked lines while black SUVs slowly rolled across the parking lot toward the main entrance. Maya lowered her eyes and quietly slid page 17 back inside the notebook. Her thumb brushed against the deep crease near the center fold where the paper had nearly ripped in half weeks earlier after she spilled detergent water on it at the laundromat. She remembered her mother trying to dry the page carefully under the weak kitchen light while the apartment heater clicked on and off in uneven bursts. "You should stop thinking about this stuff at night," her mother had whispered then. "Kids need sleep." Maya had looked at the heater vent and answered softly, "Not if the building catches fire first." At the front of the classroom, Chloe adjusted her display one last time. Maya noticed something else then. Tucked partially behind the board sat a yellow legal pad with Mrs. Granger's handwriting on it. Half the page was hidden, but one sentence remained visible for just a second before Mrs. Granger flipped it over. "Whitmore Pilot Program Approval Package." Maya froze. Pilot program. That was the same phrase printed on the maintenance paperwork her mother accidentally brought home 2 months ago from the downtown office tower she cleaned at night. Maya had seen it while helping empty trash bags at the kitchen table. Same logo. Same blue triangle. Same valve diagram. A cold feeling crept slowly into her stomach. The classroom door opened before she could think further. Ethan Whitmore entered surrounded by polished shoes, dark coats, camera operators, and the faint expensive smell of cedar cologne drifting in from the hallway. Everyone straightened immediately. Ethan offered the practiced smile of a man who had spent years walking through schools, hospitals, and charity events, while reporters watched every movement he made. But the smile faded slightly when he noticed Maya standing alone in the back row holding together a torn notebook with both hands like it contained something breakable. Mrs. Granger moved quickly toward him. "Mr. Whitmore," she said warmly, "we're so honored to host you today." Ethan nodded politely while scanning the classroom with quick, controlled eyes. Years in corporate negotiations had trained him to notice details without appearing to look directly at them. The expensive display boards, the cameras, the nervous students. Then, his attention paused very briefly on Maya's notebook. One page corner stuck out farther than the others. Red pencil marks covered the edge. And across the top margin, barely visible from where he stood, someone had written 3 words in uneven handwriting. They already knew. Ethan Whitmore's eyes remained on the red pencil words for 1 second longer than they should have. They already knew. The handwriting was uneven, pressed too hard into the paper as if the person writing had been cold or frightened or trying not to shake. Mrs. Granger stepped smoothly between Ethan and Maya before anyone else noticed where he was looking. Our top student is Chloe Parker, she said brightly, guiding him toward the front display. She designed an energy efficiency concept inspired by your company's housing initiative. Maya saw Mrs. Granger's smile change when she said the word inspired. Smaller, tighter. Ethan nodded politely, but his attention drifted once more toward the notebook. And the other student? He asked casually. Mrs. Granger's hand touched Maya's shoulder just a little too quickly. Oh, Maya's project isn't really presentation ready. Maya spoke before the teacher could continue. The pressure valve opens the wrong direction. Silence flickered across the room for half a breath. Chloe crossed her arms immediately. No, it doesn't. Maya looked directly at the display board. At full overnight load, the heat backs into the lower pipe. If the housing cracks, steam pressure builds inside the wall. A few students exchanged confused looks. Mrs. Granger gave a soft laugh meant for adults, not children. Maya spends a lot of time imagining disasters. Ethan still had not moved away. How old are you? He asked Maya quietly. 9. And how do you know about pressure housing? Maya hesitated. Her fingers touched the small rusted screw inside her hoodie pocket again. I listen. Ethan's expression barely changed, but something in his eyes sharpened slightly. He had spent most of his adult life around people desperate to impress him. Executives, politicians, investors. They usually talked too much. This child answered questions like every word cost something. Chloe quickly stepped beside her glowing board. I can explain the thermal exchange process if you want, she offered eagerly. Ethan nodded once, but while Chloe began rehearsing memorized lines about energy sustainability, his gaze drifted lower across the display, toward the bottom corner, toward the printed timestamp label Maya had noticed earlier. February 11th. Ethan's face remained calm. Interesting, he murmured. Our pilot revision wasn't approved until February 19th. Chloe stopped talking. Just for a second. Mrs. Granger answered immediately. Too immediately. The students were given preliminary educational materials ahead of schedule. Ethan looked at her then. Not suspicious yet. Just careful. Ahead of schedule? Mrs. Granger smiled again. Whitmore Energy has always supported early STEM access. Maya watched Mrs. Granger's hand tighten around her phone behind her clipboard. A notification lit the screen briefly before the teacher flipped it over. Maya only caught part of the message. Delete older draft copies. Her stomach tightened. Ethan's assistant stepped closer beside him holding an iPad filled with event schedules and donor notes, but Ethan barely glanced at it. Instead, he looked toward Maya again. You said the valve was backwards, he said mildly. How long ago did you notice that? Maya answered immediately. January 3rd. Mrs. Granger's eyes flashed toward her. That's impossible, Chloe said. The revised diagrams didn't even exist then. The room went very still after that, because Chloe realized what she had admitted 1 second too late. Ethan did not react outwardly. He simply reached into his coat pocket, pulled out his phone, and took a quiet photo of Maya's notebook page while everyone else stared at Chloe. Then he asked the smallest question yet. How did a 4th grader know about a revision package before my engineering department signed off on it? No one answered right away. Rain continued tapping softly against the windows while somewhere down the hallway a television cart rolled past with squeaking wheels. Mrs. Granger finally cleared her throat. Children misunderstand things all the time, but Maya was already shaking her head. No, ma'am, she said softly. I saw the blueprints the same night the maintenance men started covering the burned wall in Building C. Ethan's eyes lifted slowly toward her. Burned wall. The phrase landed differently this time, because 2 months earlier, Whitmore Energy's legal department had quietly settled a fire complaint connected to one of their low-income pilot properties, and almost nobody outside the company was supposed to know about it. The silence after Ethan Whitmore mentioned the fire complaint felt strangely delicate, like thin glass waiting to crack. Mrs. Granger recovered first. I think, she said carefully, smoothing the front of her blazer. We may be letting a child's imagination drift too far into adult matters. Her voice stayed warm for the cameras, but Maya noticed she no longer looked directly at her. Ethan's legal advisor, Martin Keller, stepped quietly beside him. Expensive charcoal suit, silver watch, calm eyes that missed very little. He leaned toward Ethan and lowered his voice enough to sound respectful without appearing secretive. "We should move this discussion somewhere private," he murmured. "There are reporters in the hallway." Ethan did not answer immediately. His attention stayed on Maya, who still held the torn notebook against her chest, while 20 pairs of eyes shifted between her and the billionaire. Chloe Parker looked pale now. Mrs. Granger touched the girl's shoulder reassuringly. "Why don't we continue the presentations?" she suggested brightly. The students worked very hard for today, but Ethan's advisor was already gently guiding the situation elsewhere. "Miss Brooks," Martin said politely, "would you come with us to the administrative office?" Maya hesitated. The room suddenly felt much larger than before. Too bright, too clean. Her soaked sneakers squeaked faintly against the tile floor as she followed the adults into the hallway lined with framed donor plaques and polished trophy cases. Students whispered behind them the moment the classroom door closed. Maya heard one boy mutter, "She's probably getting expelled." Nobody corrected him. The administrative office upstairs smelled like coffee, printer, toner, and lemon furniture polish. A television mounted near the secretary's desk silently replayed footage from Ethan's arrival, while captions crawled beneath the screen about Whitmore Energy's newest affordable housing initiative. Maya sat in a leather chair that swallowed half her body. Her notebook rested on her lap beneath both hands. Across from her, Principal Donovan folded his fingers neatly on the desk. "Maya," he began gently, "Mr. Whitmore's company handles extremely sensitive projects. Sometimes children misunderstand technical conversations adults are having nearby." Maya stayed quiet. Martin Keller sat beside Ethan flipping through notes on a tablet. "The fire settlement records were sealed," he said softly to Ethan. "There's no public release mentioning Building C." Ethan nodded once without looking up. Mrs. Granger stepped into the office carrying Chloe's display folder. "I truly think this is becoming unfair to Chloe," she said. "She followed every instruction we gave her." Maya noticed something then. Mrs. Granger's hand shook slightly while placing the folder on the desk. Just once, barely visible. Ethan finally spoke again. "Maya," he said evenly, "you mentioned maintenance workers covering a burned wall." Maya nodded. "When was that?" "January 3rd. Martin glanced toward Ethan immediately. "Same date as the notebook page." "And how exactly did you see it?" Maya lowered her eyes toward the frayed edge of the notebook. "My mom cleans offices downtown at night," she answered softly. Principal Donovan's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. "Not cruel, just uncomfortable." "Maya," he said carefully, "there's a difference between overhearing adults and understanding engineering reports." Maya looked at him for the first time since entering the office. "I know." The principal offered a patient smile adults used when they believed children were confused. "Then perhaps you misunderstood what you saw." Maya slowly opened the notebook to page 17. Several loose sheets slipped partly free near the spine. Taped between them was a small folded receipt stained with detergent water. Ethan noticed it immediately. Maya unfolded it carefully on her knees. Laundromat supply receipt. January 3rd. 11:42 p.m. On the back, written in pencil beside soap inventory numbers, were pressure calculations matching the same valve diagram Chloe presented. Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly. "You wrote this that night?" Maya nodded. "While my mom was folding uniforms." Mrs. Granger laughed softly, almost relieved. "Children copy things from the internet all the time." But Maya answered before Ethan could speak. "Then why did Chloe's project keep my mistake too?" The room went still again. Because that was the problem no one had explained yet. If Maya had copied the design incorrectly, Chloe's polished presentation should not have repeated the exact same hidden flaw. Martin Keller slowly lifted his eyes from the receipt toward Mrs. Granger. And for the first time since entering the office, Mrs. Granger looked away first. Mrs. Granger's eyes dropped first, but only for a second. Then her expression settled back into something controlled and professional, the kind adults used when they believed calmness alone could bury a problem. "This is getting wildly out of proportion," she said softly. "A child made notes after overhearing maintenance workers. That doesn't mean she understands corporate engineering." Ethan Whitmore still had not answered. His gaze remained fixed on the damp receipt in Maya's hands. January 3rd, 11:42 p.m. The time bothered him more than he expected, because the internal incident report for Building C had been logged at 11:38 p.m. For minutes earlier. Maya carefully slid the receipt back between the notebook pages before anyone could reach for it. Ethan noticed that too. The way she protected papers adults kept trying to dismiss. Not possessive, careful, like someone who already understood what happened when proof disappeared. Martin Keller cleared his throat gently. "Mr. Whitmore," he said in a low voice, "perhaps we should continue this discussion at headquarters." Principal Donovan nodded immediately. "Yes, I'm sure we can resolve any misunderstandings quietly." Quietly. The word lingered strangely in the room. Maya lowered her eyes. She had heard adults use that word before, usually right before something important vanished. Ethan finally leaned back slightly in the leather chair. "Maya," he asked evenly, "did you keep anything else from that night?" Mrs. Granger answered before Maya could. "Surely we are not entertaining evidence collected by a fourth grader." Ethan did not look at her when he replied. "I asked Maya." The office became very still after that. Outside, the rain had slowed to a faint tapping against the long front windows near the parking lot. Somewhere beyond the hallway, a secretary stirred powdered creamer into coffee with a plastic spoon. Tiny, repetitive clicks drifted through the silence. Maya slowly unzipped the front pocket of her backpack. Inside were school papers, a cracker wrapper, and an old phone charger tied together with a rubber band. Then she pulled out a cracked silver cell phone with no case. The screen was fractured through one corner, and one strip of clear tape held the battery cover in place. "It's my mom's old phone," Maya said quietly. "She thinks it doesn't work anymore." Mrs. Granger immediately folded her arms. "Mr. Whitmore, this is inappropriate." But Maya kept speaking. "I used it because the flashlight still works." Ethan watched her thumb carefully swipe through the damaged screen. Most apps were dead. Half the icons flickered, but one folder remained open. Photos. Maya stopped at a picture taken inside a dim maintenance hallway. Pipes, concrete walls, burn marks climbing upward behind a gray utility panel. Ethan leaned forward slightly without realizing he had moved. Maya zoomed in with 2 fingers. Near the edge of the frame stood part of a man's arm wearing a Navy Company jacket with the Whitmore Energy logo stitched above the pocket. Nothing unusual there, but clipped beneath the logo was a silver executive security badge. Ethan's face changed almost invisibly. Executive badges were not issued to maintenance crews. Martin noticed it too. "Can you enlarge that?" he asked quietly. Maya nodded and tapped the screen again. The image blurred slightly under the cracked glass, but the badge number remained visible enough for Ethan to recognize the first 2 digits immediately. E7. Senior Executive Clearance. His company only had 11 active E7 badges in the entire state. Mrs. Granger's voice came too quickly this time. Anyone could fake a badge in a blurry photo. Maya looked at her calmly. Then why did somebody delete the hallway cameras after the fire? No one answered. Ethan slowly reached for the phone. Maya hesitated before handing it over. "I kept it because my mom said nobody listens to poor people when something expensive breaks," she whispered. Ethan stared at the burned wall photo much longer than necessary. Then his thumb moved once across the cracked screen. Another image appeared accidentally for less than a second before Maya tried to pull the phone back. But Ethan had already seen it. A photograph of 2 men standing near Building C the night of the fire. One was wearing a maintenance jacket. The other was Ethan's longtime chief operations officer, Daniel Mercer. Daniel Mercer. Ethan Whitmore stared at the photograph without blinking while rainwater slid slowly down the office windows behind him. The image was grainy, taken in poor light, but there was no mistaking the man beside the burned wall. Same silver hair at the temples. Same narrow shoulders. Same expensive navy overcoat Daniel wore almost every winter for the past decade. Ethan finally handed the cracked phone back to Maya very carefully, as though the damaged thing carried more weight than anyone else in the room understood. "Where did your mother get these pictures?" he asked quietly. "She cleans offices downtown," Maya answered. "Sometimes maintenance people leave doors open." Mrs. Granger folded her arms tighter. "Mr. Whitmore, surely you don't believe a child understands what she's looking at?" Ethan ignored the question. "Martin," he said calmly, "contact corporate archives and request every maintenance file connected to Building C." Martin Keller glanced at him once before nodding. "Including deleted records?" Ethan's eyes stayed on the rain outside. "Especially deleted records." Principal Donovan shifted uneasily in his chair. "Perhaps this should wait until we have proper context." Ethan stood slowly. The movement alone changed the room. Not loudly, not dramatically, but every adult there suddenly became aware that the billionaire was no longer treating the situation like a misunderstanding between students. "No," Ethan said softly. "I think it's waited long enough already." Maya remained silent while the adults exchanged careful looks over her head. She had seen this kind of silence before in apartment offices when landlords discussed broken heaters without looking directly at tenants. Calm voices, careful words, people deciding what counted as important while pretending nobody else noticed. Martin stepped into the hallway with his phone pressed to his ear. Ethan could hear only fragments through the partly open office door. "Pull archived footage. Yes, even restricted backups. No, do not notify Mercer yet." Mrs. Granger's posture changed slightly at the sound of Daniel Mercer's name. Ethan noticed that too. Small things had started standing out to him now. The way she touched her necklace whenever Mercer was mentioned. The way Chloe Parker kept staring at the floor instead of looking confused like the other students. The way Principal Donovan repeatedly checked the clock as though hoping time itself could close the conversation. Maya quietly slid the old phone back into her backpack. Ethan looked at her. "You held onto all this for months?" Maya nodded once. "Why?" She shrugged faintly. "Because people kept saying the fire wasn't real." Ethan studied her for a moment. Most children would have asked for attention by now. Or praise. Or protection. Maya only looked tired. "Did anyone offer you money for the notebook?" Ethan asked carefully. Mrs. Granger answered too quickly again. "That's ridiculous." But Maya spoke over her in the same soft voice. "A man came to our apartment 2 weeks ago." Ethan's expression did not move, but Martin, returning from the hallway, stopped walking. "What man?" Maya looked down at her worn sneakers. "I don't know his name." "What did he want?" "The notebook." Silence settled heavily across the office. "What did he offer you?" Martin asked. Maya hesitated. "A new heater for our apartment." Ethan felt something cold move slowly through his chest. "And what did you say?" Maya answered immediately. "No." Mrs. Granger let out a quiet breath through her nose. Children exaggerate things when they're frightened. But Maya shook her head once. "I wasn't scared," she said softly. "I just knew if they wanted it that bad. Something inside it mattered." Nobody spoke after that. Outside, thunder rolled low across the city, while fluorescent office lights buzzed faintly overhead. Somewhere near the secretary's desk, a microwave beeped twice and stopped. Ethan walked toward the rain-streaked window and loosened his cuff slightly with one hand. For 15 years Daniel Mercer had handled crisis management for Whitmore Energy. Lawsuits, safety complaints, internal investigations. Ethan trusted him enough to sign reports without rereading every line. He trusted him enough to manage problems quietly before they reached headlines. Martin's phone vibrated again. He glanced down at the screen, then slowly looked up at Ethan. "The Building C security footage," he said carefully. 7 minutes were permanently deleted the night of the fire. Ethan remained still. "Who authorized the deletion?" Martin swallowed once before answering. "Daniel Mercer's executive credentials." Ethan stared at the rain beyond the glass for a long moment after that. Then very quietly, almost to himself, he said, "I think I've been protecting the wrong people." The rain had stopped by the time Ethan Whitmore's convoy pulled into the underground garage beneath Whitmore Energy headquarters. Water still clung to the black SUV windows in thin silver streaks while the city outside turned dark and reflective under streetlights. Maya sat quietly in the back seat beside Martin Keller with her torn notebook resting on her knees. She had never been inside a vehicle this quiet before. No rattling engine. No buzzing heater. Only the soft hum of expensive tires against wet pavement and the occasional vibration of Martin's phone lighting up with incoming messages he refused to answer aloud. Ethan sat in the front beside the driver staring at nothing. "We'll use conference room 7, he finally said. "No assistants. No executive alerts." Martin nodded once. "And Mercer?" Ethan adjusted his cuff slowly. "Not yet." Upstairs, the executive floor smelled faintly of cedarwood and fresh coffee. Glass walls overlooked downtown Atlanta glowing beneath the wet night sky. Maya felt very small walking past silent reception desks and framed magazine covers with Ethan's face on them. A cleaning woman pushing a cart glanced at Maya's soaked hoodie, then quickly looked away. Conference room 7 was cold enough that Maya tucked her hands beneath her sleeves. On the center table sat a pitcher of water no one touched and a black conference phone blinking softly in the middle of the room. Ethan removed his coat and placed it carefully over the back of a chair. Then he looked at Maya. "You said someone came for the notebook 2 weeks ago." Maya nodded. "Did he touch anything?" "No." "Did he say who sent him?" "No." Ethan considered that quietly. "But you remember something." Maya looked down at the notebook. His shoes squeaked. Martin frowned slightly. "What?" "The floor outside our apartment gets slippery when the washing machines overflow," Maya explained softly. "Most people walk normal." He kept stopping because his shoes squeaked every 3 steps. Ethan's eyes narrowed just slightly. Maya continued. "And he smelled like the cleaning spray from Building C." Martin slowly exchanged a look with Ethan. "Cheap industrial disinfectant." Whitmore Contractors had used the same chemical supplier for years. Ethan walked toward the dark glass wall overlooking the city. "Martin," he said calmly, "bring Mercer up here." Martin hesitated. "Without warning?" "Especially without warning." 10 minutes later, Daniel Mercer entered the conference room carrying his umbrella and wearing the same composed expression he brought into shareholder meetings and press briefings. He smiled faintly when he saw Maya. Too faintly. Too controlled. "Mr. Whitmore," he said smoothly, "I was told there was some kind of issue involving a student." Ethan gestured toward the table. "Sit down." Mercer complied without complaint. But Maya noticed his eyes stop for half a second on the torn notebook before moving away. Ethan remained standing. "Maya has concerns about the Building C incident," he said evenly. Mercer gave a small patient smile adults used when humoring children. "The fire investigation was closed months ago." Ethan poured water into 2 glasses. One for himself. One for Mercer. Maya noticed Ethan never drank his. "Closed doesn't always mean solved," Ethan replied. Mercer folded his hands neatly. "With respect, sir, we're discussing information gathered by a 9-year-old child." Ethan finally sat down across from him. Calm, quiet, almost gentle. "Then this should be simple." He slid Chloe Parker's presentation photos across the table. "Tell me where these revised valve schematics came from." Mercer barely glanced at them. "Probably from internal educational outreach files." "Interesting," Ethan said softly, "because those files were never approved for public release." For the first time, Mercer's fingers stopped moving. Tiny pause. Less than a second. But Maya saw it immediately. Ethan saw it too. No one spoke while the conference phone continued blinking silently between them. Then Ethan asked the question that made the room colder. "Daniel," he said quietly, "why were your executive credentials inside Building C the night of the fire?" Mercer leaned back slowly. "I inspect all pilot properties periodically." Calm answer. Reasonable answer. But Maya suddenly looked toward the conference room door. "That's not true," she said softly. Mercer turned toward her with the same practiced patience. "Excuse me." Maya pointed at his shoes. "Black leather. Polished. Expensive. You weren't wearing those that night." Silence. Mercer's expression did not fully change, but one hand tightened slightly against the table edge. Maya swallowed once. "You had gray work boots," she whispered, "because they squeaked every 3 steps." Ethan Whitmore did not move at all after that. He simply reached over, pressed one button on the conference phone, and the small red camera light above the screen blinked on. The tiny red camera light blinked steadily above the conference phone while no one moved. Daniel Mercer looked at Ethan first, not Maya. That was the mistake. People looked at children when they thought children were powerless. Mercer was trying to measure how much the billionaire already knew. Ethan sat perfectly still with one hand resting near the untouched glass of water. "The recording is active," he said quietly. "So let's try this again." Mercer gave a restrained smile. "Ethan, surely we're not turning a child's misunderstanding into an internal interrogation." Maya noticed his voice had changed. Softer now. Careful. The way people talked near sharp objects. Ethan slid Chloe Parker's project photos aside and folded his hands. "You said you inspected Building C personally." "Yes. In work boots." Mercer's eyes flicked briefly toward Maya. "Industrial sites require safety footwear." Maya spoke before Ethan could continue. "No," she said softly. "Not those boots." Mercer looked at her again. "Excuse me?" "The man outside our apartment had paint on the left toe," Maya whispered. "Yellow paint." Silence. Ethan's expression did not change, but Martin Keller slowly opened a folder he had carried into the room minutes earlier without anyone noticing. Inside were printed maintenance reports and security access logs. Mercer saw the folder and his jaw tightened almost invisibly. Martin slid one page across the glass table toward Ethan. "Maintenance crews switched to orange safety paint 6 months ago," he said quietly. "Only executive inspectors still use yellow-coated boots." Mercer leaned back slightly. "This is absurd." But his voice no longer sounded bored. Ethan finally picked up the old cracked cell phone Maya had placed on the table earlier. "Maya," he said calmly, "show me the other file." Mercer's eyes moved immediately toward the phone. Tiny movement. Fast enough that most people would miss it. Maya didn't. She reached for the phone carefully, opened the damaged photo folder again, then hesitated. "The battery dies sometimes," she whispered. The room held still while the loading wheel spun across the broken screen. 1 second. 2. 3. Even the blinking conference phone seemed loud now. Mercer's hand rested near the edge of the table, relaxed on the surface, but one finger tapped once against the glass. Ethan noticed that too. Then the file opened. Not a photo this time. Video. Grainy security footage from inside the Building C. Service corridor. Date stamp, January 3rd, 11:41 p.m. The hallway looked dim and wet from burst pipe runoff. 2 men stood near the damaged utility wall arguing quietly. One was clearly Daniel Mercer. The other wore contractor coveralls with a partially visible company patch. Maya pressed play. "The valves are failing," the contractor hissed through static. "People are gonna get hurt." Mercer answered immediately. "Calm. Cold. Then replace the damaged units quietly and keep the rollout moving." The contractor shook his head. "We should shut the buildings down." Mercer stepped closer. "Do you understand how much money delays cost this company?" Ethan Whitmore stopped breathing for a second. The recording continued. "Families are still living in those apartments," the contractor said. "One fire already started." Mercer's answer came softer this time. More dangerous because of how normal it sounded. "Then make sure there isn't another report." The video cut abruptly after that. No dramatic ending. No confession screamed into the camera. Just silence. Rainwater dripping somewhere off-screen. Maya lowered the phone slowly. Nobody in the room moved. Ethan stared at the frozen image of Daniel Mercer standing beside the burned wall, while the city lights reflected dimly across the conference room glass behind him. 15 years. 15 years trusting the man sitting across from him. Letting him manage complaints. Letting him bury problems before they reached headlines. Letting poor families stay inside dangerous buildings because reports said everything was under control. Ethan's face slowly lost all color. Mercer finally spoke, voice tight now. That footage is incomplete. Ethan did not answer. It's out of context, Mercer continued carefully. You don't understand the pressure we were under during rollout. Ethan still said nothing. That frightened Mercer more than anger would have. Maya looked down at her torn notebook resting beside the phone. My mom said the hallway smelled like smoke for weeks, she whispered. Ethan closed his eyes briefly after hearing that. Not because of the fire, because somewhere in the middle of billion-dollar meetings and expansion, schedules and carefully managed reports, he had stopped hearing people like Maya's mother completely. When he opened his eyes again, something inside them looked colder than before. He reached forward slowly, took the cracked cell phone from Maya with both hands, and placed it in the center of the glass table beside the recording logs. Then he looked at Martin Keller without raising his voice at all. Call my attorney. 3 weeks later, the rain finally stopped over Atlanta. The city looked cleaner afterward, though Ethan Whitmore no longer trusted appearances the way he once had. Conference Room 7 remained sealed under legal review, while federal investigators moved through Whitmore Energy's compliance offices floor by floor. Daniel Mercer had resigned publicly on a Friday morning before the board could remove him. By Monday, subpoenas had already followed him home. 2 contractors lost their licenses. Internal emails surfaced showing safety reports altered before reaching Ethan's desk. News stations called it negligence. Attorneys called it systemic concealment. Ethan called it failure. He sat through every board hearing personally. No assistants. No press statements written by PR teams. Just long hours beneath fluorescent lights while families from Building C described smoke inside vents, cracked pipes, children coughing at night, heaters failing in freezing weather. Maya's mother, Rochelle Brooks, testified quietly with both hands folded in her lap. She spoke about bleach burns on her wrists from working double shifts, and about tenants being told repairs were already scheduled, for months that never came. Ethan listened to every word without interrupting once. Mrs. Granger was removed from Jefferson Elementary after the district investigation confirmed she had transferred Maya's engineering concepts into Chloe Parker's scholarship submission while discouraging Maya from entering the competition herself. Chloe's parents returned the scholarship money publicly. Chloe cried through most of the hearing and admitted she had known the project was not entirely hers. But the district did not expel her. Ethan quietly requested they don't destroy another child, just to repair an adult's corruption. Maya never asked what happened to Mrs. Granger afterward. By then, other things mattered more. Building C was shut down for repairs within 48 hours of the investigation reopening. Families were relocated into temporary furnished apartments paid for through an emergency restoration fund Ethan created himself without board approval. Rochelle Brooks received a permanent position overseeing tenant safety reporting for the new housing division because, as Ethan told the board directly, the people cleaning the buildings noticed the danger before the executives did. Maya's old apartment looked different now. Warm, quiet, safe enough that the heater no longer rattled through the walls at 3 in the morning. Someone from Ethan's office tried replacing all the family's furniture, but Rochelle refused most of it. Maya refused too. We only needed things fixed, she said softly. So Ethan listened. The cracked kitchen window was replaced. The wiring was redone. The mold behind the bathroom sink disappeared. And for the first time in years, the hallway outside their apartment smelled like clean laundry instead of burned plastic. Maya returned to school 2 Mondays later carrying the same torn notebook beneath her arm. Only now nobody laughed when they saw it. Jefferson Elementary's principal personally walked her into the STEM lab while students quietly stared from their desks. Near the back wall hung a framed copy of page 17 beneath a small brass plaque. The child everyone ignored saw the danger first. But the moment Ethan remembered most happened later that evening, long after reporters left and lawyers stopped calling. He stood alone in Rochelle Brooks's kitchen while rainwater dripped softly from the fire escape outside. The apartment lights were low. A small television played quietly in another room. Maya sat at the table wearing oversized pajama sleeves while carefully repairing the spine of her notebook again with fresh tape. Ethan watched her hands for a moment. "You know," he said quietly, "we could replace that notebook now." Maya shook her head without looking up. "No, sir." "Why not?" She pressed the tape flat against the cover gently before answering. "Because everybody believed the shiny version first." Ethan looked at her after that without speaking. On the stove nearby, Rochelle poured warm milk into a chipped mug while the heater hummed steadily through the apartment for the first winter night in a very long time. Maya finally closed the notebook and slid it carefully onto the center of the kitchen table between them. The pages were still wrinkled. The corners still burned dark from old heat damage. But nobody tried to throw it away anymore. And in the quiet little apartment above the laundromat, with the lights glowing warm against the rain-streaked windows, Ethan Whitmore understood something that all his boardrooms and billion-dollar reports had failed to teach him. The truth had not come from the most powerful voice in the room. It had come from the child everyone had asked to stay quiet.